So welcome everyone to tonight's presentation with Emmy Award-winning journalist Heather Kovar and Thom Reed of Berkshires UFO family incident. So without further ado, we're going to have a conversation about media and disclosure. So if you want to take it away, Thom or Heather, the con is yours.
Okay,
Excellent.
well,
Well, I am privileged and I'm happy to be here. And I think this is a great opportunity to also hear from Thom about his incident. And I had the privilege of covering it for the first time back 10 years ago in 2015 when I first covered it. And a lot of media coverage, different issues have changed since then. So we'll talk about that. But I think it'd be great to start just kind of hearing from Thom and about this incident that happened back in 1969, right? And is considered historically significant there in Massachusetts.
and true. So yes, Heather was the very first journalist, an Emmy award-winning journalist, and news anchor actually to cover our case in a unbiased or professional manner. And with that, I learned a lot too because we had been thrown under the bus, as had the Historical Society, due to local reporters who had a different opinion on the subject, and maybe it challenged their beliefs or what have you. But it wasn't until Heather came in from New York and actually met with the Historical Society, and the director of the Historical Society interviewed me at the location. And so I was sitting there with my fingers crossed, waiting to see it on the air. And I was like, yes, she treated me fairly. And so with that, we've been kind of friends ever since. So yeah, to give you an idea, the first paper to cover us was the Boston Globe. And when they came down to meet with the Historical Society and Debbie Opperman, that it had already at that point been inducted into state as historically true. And because of our ties to the space race, the Goodwill Message, the diner, the jukebox, the conversations that took place in the area. And so it was worded as an off-world incident. And yes, I was part of it. I saw it. But just because I saw something extraordinary or a part of something extraordinary doesn't mean I had to live a life of, sadness, right? Which I mentioned earlier with Heather. And so with that, I have tried to further the message about UFOs or the topic, because to me, it's a very important topic. We are not alone, and I know it, but you have to be careful how you word things, which was a big issue for Debbie Opperman, the director of the Historical Society. And so she pretty much pleaded with the Boston Globe, which came down to interview her. And I actually have the article. That's the Boston Globe. And we made the cover. And she mentioned to them that, please be respectful. This is no longer a claim, it's history. And what did they do? Right out of the gate, they just kind of mentioned, you know, abductions and claims and all this kind of thing. It got so bad that she moved on from her position. And not only did it hurt the Historical Society for trying to do something pioneering and supportive to the topic, but those like Heather and others who supported and or were fair about their reporting now see these headlines where things are downplaying and almost making fun, the rolling of the eyes and that kind of thing. So it hurts everybody. How was that, Heather? Does that pretty much sum it up?
It does. And it was back in 2015, and I spoke with Debbie Opperman as well. And she had said that, the reason this had been inducted and they're happy people are just talking about it because they felt that it was historically significant. And she said that she was grateful to you, Thom, for the opportunity to preserve this remarkable story for generations. And speaking of media coverage, I mean, back in the day in 1969, there were several reports about the incident. People had seen it, and that is in other newspapers from back that time period. Correct, Thom?
Right. Yeah, exactly. And so one more thing I want to mention before I
Hmm.
forget. Okay. So when our case you might see some articles that say the governor rescinded his citation or what have you. Well, here's what happened. And this, Terry Cowgill to me is like an awful journalist, and I'll throw him under the bus because he tried to do that to me. So, but anyway, he wrote an article that clearly stated that, first of all, I put the monument there, and that you might have seen those, and that the governor rescinded his citation. So this is how I think those who have an agenda, and like you said to me, controversy sells papers. And so there was the first citation, which was issued in October. And this one did not have the date of incident on it. It had my birthday. And so somehow that got pushed through because each citation or proclamation must have a date of occurrence or date of incident. And it was corrected. And another one was sealed by a judge in a 30th District Court, which was the amended citation, which had the actual date of occurrence, September 1st, 1969. So when his article comes out on top of the Boston Globe, almost making fun of the Historical Society and the governor, if you really want to go that far. And then this one comes out saying that I put the monument there and the governor rescinded the citation right out of the gate. Now you've got all these questions. And again, the only journalist and or news anchor that really had my back was Heather. And so I appreciate that.
And, it wasn't an issue of, is it belief? Am I interested even in UFOs? No, I mean, it's a news story, and it was something that was had been inducted into the Great Barrington Historical Society. So, that was that's a news story. And of course, when I got to cover it, it's not one of those issues that any journalist can just say, hey, I'm going to just start covering this, especially if they work in the local news. I mean, you really are assigned stories. And so you can pitch them, but especially like in Tom's incident, it was, in Great Barrington. So that's an hour, outside of Albany. And you have very little time to put things together. And they do want you to suss it out. I mean, when they gave me the opportunity to cover this, I don't think I had a choice to say yes or no. I was excited that I'm, going an hour away. I'm going to get to, meet this man and learn a little history. Right. And see what it's all about. It's about telling the different sides. They did want me to try to, knock on some doors and see if people could also kind of debunk it, say, oh, well, this is that, you want both sides in a news story. They wanted me to try to do that. But instead, what I got was Tom walking me over the bridge where he saw something back in 1969. And I spoke to Deborah Opperman, who talked to me about why this is hometown news and why it was important and why, it was in the Historical Society. And when I did try to find some people around town, that nobody really wanted to talk on camera about it. They either hadn't heard about it, or the one just said, that kind of lived in a home near it, said, we just want our privacy respected. We don't want to go on camera. So that's what I got out of that, trying to push the other side, trying to see if somebody would say, oh, this is just crazy hoax. But I did not return with any of that for my story.
I'm glad you didn't. So
Right?
when you got back, yeah, I know. So when you got back to Albany, how was the station? Were they like, what did you think, Heather, right? What was their take? How did they, what was
I
their
was
perception?
lucky. The people I worked with at that time, they were actually interested in it. They thought that it was an interesting story because I think that one of the assignment managers had thought that he had seen something back in the past or heard a lot of people. I mean, come on, the Hudson Valley and that whole region, parts of Connecticut, Massachusetts, and then New York, there are stories over the years, stories after stories. And I think it's interesting. I mean, look how many, videos have been made about different incidents in the Hudson Valley. It's a hotbed.
It is a hotbed. You're absolutely right. And that's kind of why our case went in support of the Hudson at the United Nations, because of the fact it was over a body of water and that kind of thing. But yeah, I think it's it's a hotbed for sure. And I think it goes even I remember stories about or sightings in the Greenwich area, Westport, even Banham Lake and Litchfield. So when something like this happens where you're kind of said, let's cover this, but and I think every local station has a certain flavor, right? And they're owned by certain networks, whether Disney or Fox or whatever. And so I think that someone like you or someone else who's given a story, you have not only your take, your footage, and what you're going to take back, but then their perception, what they cut, what they keep, what they don't cut, and then if they even want to run it at all, right? I mean, there's all these steps.
That does happen a lot of times. If we put something together and go out, well, they demand, they want something because they need the content. I mean, everyone knows local media is shrinking. A lot of journalists are losing their jobs as these companies are, making themselves smaller and putting their assets in other places other than individual workers. And so we're dealing with that. But yes, you can get back to the station and they can determine, well, we're going to hold that. We don't really like that, or it's not working, or we have this other breaking news we need to air. We'll hold that. We'll play that on the weekend. And sometimes it just doesn't happen. And they will cut your pieces down. Let's say a reporter files a 1.5-minute piece, which is still not a lot of time to try to get the facts in and make a story make sense, but that's pretty much the parameters. And so I remember in this specific case of the story, I put that one story together and then somebody else cut it down for a smaller story. So it's just like a mention, a tidbit on another station, another newscast. And I remember thinking, oh, I wish I had known, I wish I had cut it down, because I think the way they had cut it down didn't really fully make sense. So I wasn't really proud of it. But that's happens, unfortunately,
I was
in a
grateful. I was
lot
grateful.
of news.
So this was also a time when you covered this that we had yet to have the UAP hearings. It was at a
Mhm.
time when I only think maybe 30% of the population actually really believed in UFOs. If the articles I read are truthful, which I doubt anyway. But now we're at a different time. So I think this was a big step for you and the station, and something to be commended for. But if you were to do that again today, do you think that the behavior or the response or how they would have or what they edited out or what have you, do you think it would have been different, or do you think that
No, I don't think the editing out. I think they just did that for time purposes to fit the little bit. And if you're not really like that knowledgeable of the story, it's just stuff like that gets cut all the time. But I think now they would definitely do a lot more focus. They would, because especially like you said, it was just last month in September that we had that House hearing on the House Oversight and Government Committee on UFOs, and they brought together one person speaking on the panel was actually a journalist, and his discussion is actually published online, house.gov, and you can read that. And I read through it, and his name is George Knapp, and he's a reporter out of Las Vegas at KLAS. And he had written that he had the privilege actually of spending 38 years kind of reporting on UFO. So he's been reporting on all the different topics. And then he wrote, well, did I ever necessarily believe? Do I? And he said, no, it's not about belief. It's about, this is a big news topic. And, it's out there. And it's so many people have pressed the government and our leaders for disclosure and for us to know more about what's going on. Regardless of what we believe in or what it is, it's still interesting because we all know there's something, and what it is and how much knowledge we actually have is something that I think people, more of the viewers, are pushing for. And so while media has been, and is more so even now, sensationalism on the headlines, going for click links, I think that they know that it is something that people might also click on because there is an interest. And we're going in the direction where we might start getting some more answers and disclosure. Tom and I did an interview with a gentleman not too long ago, Stephen Bassett, and he's the first and only person registered to lobby about UFOs in the United States. And he said he thinks more information is going to be released and coming out. And he's been on this for 20 years. And so he told us that he was very hopeful
well
that he thinks it's
yeah,
sooner than later
and,
that we're going to
and
get more information.
yeah, and I think one of the conversations we had together with Steve was that the mistake, he thinks that the mistake being made in Congress is actually showing the footage,
Hmm.
because if it ever turns out to be questionable,
Or debunked, because he said a lot of the videos can be debunked. Oh, it was this, oh, it was that. And he said that if we're using all that all the time, every time we get some video in that we think could be something, and you show it and you show it and you show it, and then it's all debunked, we're not going to believe. And it's going to be one of those things, again, where you just push it away. And he had said that what he would more focus on specifically from that House hearing is the testimony, because there was also, there was lawmakers and 2 U.S. Air Force veterans that spoke and told what they saw. And so I guess he was trying to say that testimony, he felt, really held a stronger point of view and maybe a better way of having facts, instead of just some video that could have been created, or AI,
Right.
or, I mean,
Yeah,
we
focus
can't
on the
even believe what we
testimony.
see anymore these
Yeah.
days.
I disagreed with him too, but the more I think about it, the more he might have been
Mhm.
right. So let me ask you this then, Heather.
Oh,
What do you think
actually,
now? I'm
Tom,
sorry.
I'm sorry to interrupt both of you. Just so before we go on to something else, I do know from a mutual friend of ours, mine and Tom's, that video that was shown during the congressional hearing a couple months ago was actually debunked.
Mhm.
So there you go. So
Somebody said it was a balloon, right?
yeah, Mark told us that it was a balloon, and Mark is Mark
Well,
D'Antonio, who's showing up on Saturday here in person at the Danbury Library, is the chief video and photo analyst for MUFON Global, and he said it was a balloon.
there's also people that say it wasn't, and if you look at the footage, it does look like it bounced right off of it or something. So if it was a balloon, wouldn't it have popped?
That's what
I'm just saying.
that's what
I'm
Mark
just saying.
says. It actually did pop, but it was like deflating. And if you saw the rest of the footage, you see it kind of deflate and go into the water. And that's what the footage he saw. And there, and Mark,
Oh, I
and
know Mark really well.
Mark, we know
He's
Mark
a good
very
friend of mine.
well. And if
No,
he
he was
said,
just on our show. Yeah, he was
yeah,
just on the show.
and if he
Mhm.
says it's not, then we have to go with it because Mark is pretty
Oh,
knowledgeable.
that's his thing. Yeah. But
Yeah.
that's to Heather's point and Steve's. I mean, that's it in a nutshell. They jump to footage, and then next thing you know, now the whole thing's bad. It's like a lie detector test, right? As soon as one thing's bad, it's all bad. And so yeah, I
So now
agree.
it makes more sense that he was saying that. At first, both Tom and I were like, really? Show less
Yeah,
video?
I'm like, no.
Like how, what are you, just testimony, just listening to people speak? But he was like, yeah, go through and read their testimony. And that's really kind of what we need to report more on and have more of. And he also said that he thought, because he's been doing this for years and years and years, dealing with the media, not being able to get coverage. But he said he really feels that there is a little bit more of it, and especially with the different, even though we have to be really careful about what you can believe, who's writing it, because you can Google UFOs and most of the stuff is AI generated and so many fake stories. But if you can find now some different different podcasters and different people are out there and are trying to bring it to the front light and talking about it, so it's of heightened interest. And from the people I've spoken with, it seems like we will only hear more and more about it as people do push for more disclosure, and people seem to believe it's coming.
So
Something.
Heather, as a you know, journalist and news anchor. Do you think now that it's almost a bad thing for a station to have the rolling of the eyes? Do you think that's a sinking ship? Do you think that that is now going to backfire if they don't start taking these sightings and news stories more seriously? Do you think we've gotten to that point?
I don't know. I don't think so. And I don't think so on a local level. The reason is because of how short staffed the majority of local news stations are, whether it's newspaper, print, or television. And they are really focused on, a lot of crime, holding officials accountable. They're looking at it, a lot of stuff like that. And so I don't think that, I mean, you might on a local newscast, if there's, like you might hear, like you probably heard about the House hearing on UFOs on your local newscast, a quick mention of it last month. But I don't think that's the place local news is where they're going to be running out and sending all of that out, because what they want to do basically is they're not going to tell a story just because you told it. We need a fact check. So like, even if someone comes to us and says something like, they stole my bike, I'm, making that up. And we're not just going to go and report that. We have to go to the police. We have to find the police report. We have to make sure that there is substance to report. So where do you draw that line? We're not going to be able, the reason I was able to cover your story is because, well, you were speaking about it. You were put, inducted into the Great Barrington Historical Society as this first off-world UFO case in U.S. history. You did have, like, you showed the document, the certificate from then Governor Charlie Baker. And so that had every element that was at least able
So that
to
was no longer just a local story.
Right. And so that could have went, but it wasn't Great Barrington's kind of, not in a great metropolitan area. You have to drive to get there. There aren't trains that take you there. And so for reporters in like Boston or New York City or even Hartford to come out there, it's a really big drive for something that they're like, we can't spend our whole resources on that. What if there's a fire here? Or what if there's breaking news we have to go cover? So it was actually a rare situation that we must have had an extra manpower that day and not a lot of else going on. Unfortunate to say, but that is why I was lucky enough to get to cover your story with you.
So it makes sense to me now. So as far as the UAP or UFO topic in general, it looks like the media then is going to leave it to the big boys on the block, the Fox Prime Times, the CNN, the MSNBC, because the local stations, or if you will, really have to focus on other things, and they're not going to just piggyback on something, or
They'll pick it up. If it goes viral, if it's one of the big stories, they'll pick it up and they'll air it. But I think for the most part, and there could be, I'm sure there are other examples, like the local reporter I used that spoke at the congressional hearing. He was a local reporter from Las Vegas. But you see, it's because he also was covering going into, those areas of Nevada, and there's quite a bit of interest in Nevada over that. So I think that he had a unique spot. I think mostly overall, local news is a little, it's going to be more of it's a delicate topic for that.
So someone listening, right? Somebody on watching right now, they have a UFO sighting. Who do you think they should call? They wouldn't call the local stations, right? Because they're like,
that's what would happen if you think you see something and you call the local station. You're probably going to get the eye roll and the but people do it as soon as there's a light up in the air. Oh my goodness, the calls come in, pictures start coming to the station. What is it? And well, I don't know, it's a comet, maybe. We don't know, but that's actually a really good question, because they're not going to just, okay, yeah, let's go get a reporter on it because this man says he saw a UFO. They're probably going to say, yeah, right, this one's not.
Well, you take the episode. I was on Fox with Mike Barra, talking about the Las Vegas thing, right?
Yeah.
That was like a comet, whatever it looked. That's what it looked like when it dove into the Vegas, and the family said, "Oh, there are aliens in my backyard," and the cops showed up and everything. The odd thing is they took it seriously. They dispatched the police and everything. And so, but I think they called the police department, but I would have expected, right? Forget it. If we have time, we'll send somebody over, but they actually took it seriously, which I would thought was it was a surprise to me.
And I think that's how it would be if for something like that. I think it would be hit or miss. You don't know. Are they going to take it seriously or not?
So where do you put UFOs and the media today? We've had huge strides. I think we all can agree to that. Where do you think we are? I mean, as somebody who has friends still in the field, and you're still very active, what do you think? What's your take on it right now?
I think it is one of the biggest, news stories as we wait, especially as we wait and see what type of information we already have and what is not being disclosed. I think that's what people are pushing for, and I think that's what I think that's what we'll see more of. We'll see, especially when some items are released, whether it's something that's like, look, it's just been military planes, or it's been, or it's something else. I think that we'll only get bits and pieces of it, and it is going to take maybe some dedicated local journalists that's maybe doing it on their own time that can kind of then write it up in a paper for their deadline. But as long as they're, you have to focus on different projects that they could. But I think that is what it's going to take to, keep pushing, because I don't think local news is going to report too much on it until stuff is actually released. Or if you have a local, one of your local leaders is on one of those panels that's pushing for it, then you're going to have more of that coverage, because you're going to want to speak to a lawmaker about it if they're involved. And if it happens to be your local senator, or, then you're going to get more of it in that way.
And like Debbie Oberman had said to me, she was so concerned about verbiage. Please don't mention gray aliens, reptilians, abductions and things like that, because that is what'll get you thrown under the bus, right?
And you didn't, but they reported it.
Well, I had a contractual agreement to speak on what happened, but not, use my own verbiage or what they consider to be tabloid verbiage. And I
Right.
think he was right. If the Boston Globe had covered the incident correctly and said, this isn't a claim, this is actual history now, and who knows what they saw or a part of, but this did happen. The entire, I think the initial rollout on our case being inducted would have been treated much better. And I think she was right about that.
So
So,
Tom, how do you sum up what happened to you? Like, so for people
well,
that might not be familiar with your
well,
story.
I go by the wording on the letter, the state documents. Off world, formally and officially inducted. I don't get too far off
Mm-hmm.
how we're worded on government and state documents, because I have to also realizing that the governor of Massachusetts did not rubber stamp a gray alien abduction. He rubber stamped the decision to induct our family in Sheffield for being part of something historic because of the ties to the space race and the goodwill message and the sightings that we had. Because again, my father was a mayor and an
yes,
attorney.
I'm available for a phone call.
What just happened?
I think we just had a glitch in the technology.
Okay.
Someone came
So anyway,
over.
where
Yeah.
I'm going with this is I try to stick to the facts. And if someone asks me my opinion, then I'll elaborate. But
Mhm.
when delivering the facts of what happened, the particulars, I try to stay to, what is now archived into U.S. history, and try to rekindle the wording and make sense of the wording, and then say, well, this is what I think happened, or this is what I believe, but I'm not going to try to oversell something too, because I've taken a polygraph test and I passed it. I would also take one again tomorrow. So I don't want to ever say anything or go too far to the point where I'm not sure, what I'm saying,
Right.
if what I'm saying is true, right? So do I think that government took us from our vehicle? Absolutely. Were we underground or somewhere like an airplane hangar or something? I've always said yes, because where we were was much bigger than the craft. So I've always said, we were extracted, we were taken from the car, right? So I just use words a little bit differently. I'm softer in the way I say it. I'm saying the same thing basically, but I'm saying it in a palatable way. You have to be palatable. So that's kind of how I move forward. But at the same time, everybody wants the headlines and the sensational news, but I don't want to be part of some whisk me away Harry Potter news article. I want to be on the cover. I don't want to be in the arts and entertainment section. Right. So
ever since, when I first covered this 2015, then there was some other coverage. You kind of got thrown under the bus a little bit, but what would you say overall? I mean, how time has passed. When you used to talk about it, did you get more eye rolls? Are you getting more people actually taking you a little more seriously now, or how has that evolved?
I in the very beginning, well, I've been talking about this since 1960s, right?
Hmm.
And in the 60s and 70s, it was brutal. I was in fights and everything else. But um, as when my father passed on the anniversary of our case going before the United Nations in support of General Assembly 33426, that is when I got a call from Historical Society, Debbie Opperman,
Hmm.
and at that point there really seemed to be a genuine interest to do something with this. And it is history to Sheffield. It's not really history to Great Barrington, but that's where the Historical Society was. And
Hmm.
that's where WSBS is, who was involved in this too. So that part of Great Barrington is instrumental. But the event itself took place in Sheffield. So the first back and forth or sparring came from Sheffield wanting to know why the Great Barrington inducted it, when it was a Sheffield thing, you know. And so I kind of got caught up in that, and I tried to make them understand too. It's not like you really have an historical society. And and then of course the monument goes in, and then there was mudslinging about that. It got spray painted and everything else, and so the first couple of months I thought, yeah, this is fantastic. We're finally growing up, right? We're finally
Hmm.
starting to make sense of things and not be so close-minded. And then bang, the articles came out, which turned everything on its head. And so at that point, you know, I was on the defensive a little bit, right? I was trying to, secure my position and say, look, I'm not the one making claims, right? The state of Massachusetts or the Commonwealth of Massachusetts,
Hmm.
they made a statement by inducting this. This is no longer a claim. This is now considered history. And so I was trying to assure that they understood that too. Um, but anyway, to really get to your answer, um, it's been a roller coaster. But I think the last 5 years has really changed a lot. The people, the general public's position on this. I think that now the general public is not as it's not as tabloid, right? They're not as hesitant. They're not just looking for that thick ice. They're willing to take a chance, right? And so I think that over the last 5 years, things have changed enormously. And you played a part in that too. There's only so many cases that real had a real impact, right? Area 51, Travis Walton, Betty and Barney Hill, our case, Bentwater, or Burroughs, John Burroughs, and Travis Walton. And there's only so many. And if you start trying to go after the bigger cases, right, and start nitpicking and trying to, find the fault, then the whole thing starts to crumble, right? Which is again why I'm so careful on my delivery and what I say, because
Hmm.
without a solid foundation, there's always going to be those people out there. The higher up you get, the more people want to knock you off, right? So it's important, I think, to realize that this is an important topic. And again, why Steve Bassett, when he said, don't show the videos because that can hurt your foundation, it makes sense to me now. When at first I was arguing with him, right? I'm like, no. Right?
You were, but
Yeah,
people are starting to
it was
think
like,
about it like,
no,
yeah, I
show
can
it, right?
see.
Yeah,
If
let
our
people make up
whole
their own
case,
mind. Yeah. But
if
he
our
was
whole
right.
case is this video and then it gets debunked, then I mean, then we don't have a case. That's why you said, you need to listen to
But I
the
would have thought before they show something in Congress that would have been looked at, carefully. Send it to Mark first, right? Whatever you got to do. But I would think that once you get to that step, you're in Congress, you're, whatever, that video would have been looked, would have been under a microscope for
yeah,
everybody.
maybe
But
it just took a little extra time to use the
yeah,
right microscope. It's interesting. You did a lot of work. You had a law firm that actually had to fly to Roswell to do some research in your case, and you do have there in Roswell the museum. You have a wall with your incident, and so that's pretty exciting. That's what you wanted.
yeah, I'm
You
glad you
you
mentioned that.
told me before that you just want to know what happened. You want to know the specific what really all of that was. But I think it's a big accomplishment that you do have this incident in the Great Barrington Historical Society as well as there in Roswell.
Yeah, and you make a really good point. So you're right. There were lawyers involved. The Roswell Museum was involved. The research library, yourself, um, and then WSBS, the governor, lieutenant governor, Judge Titus, the Historical Society in Massachusetts. So if I screw up, right, and say something I shouldn't, and it gets
Mhm.
twisted in the papers again, it's not just me that's going to fall for that. It's everybody
And
who
see,
supported me.
that's when papers start picking up stories when things get sensational and sketchy, and somebody makes a claim against
Controversy
you
sells papers.
that you put the monument up, and then all of a sudden we're talking about UFOs, but we've got somebody to come after.
Do you
We
know
can.
when the journalist wrote that? I got a call from the Roswell Museum asking me what was going on because I had told them that I didn't put the monument there, and I didn't. I had nothing to do with it. I live a
Mhm.
thousand miles away. And then, anyway, to stay on this topic. So I get a call like, Tom, what's going on? And I'm like, I don't know what's going on either. So when uh, a sloppy journalism, or someone who's looking for a soundbite or the controversy sells papers, that can hurt a lot of people. And it can also hurt our
Mhm.
sponsors and it can hurt the topic. And then, like right now, I've got nonsense connected to my wiki, you know?
Mhm.
Right. So I want to show you this. So you're right. So a lawyer went to cover my address here. A lawyer actually, I had to retain an attorney to go to um, Roswell and do some research on GA 33426 and other information that Debbie Opperman from the Historical Society wanted. And while I was there, I actually got in the Roswell Daily Record with her. And
Oh, wow.
so if you go to this is how stupid it is. If you go to the Historical Society and you ask for Bob will tell you, "Oh no, this wasn't mentioned in Roswell or the." And now, actually, you've actually spoken to a sitting personal. What was that? Christina Arnold, a sitting councilwoman for the city of Roswell, who also verified that this. Yes, of course, they helped Debbie Opperman mine for information because she had to have source documents, and
Mhm.
so not even the historical society will validate that because there's new people in place. So this is how messy it gets. You get bad journalism. You get reporters who are just looking for a soundbite. Yet so many still have the rolling of the eyes over the topic. Then they make a statement in the paper that's not true. And then all the people that played a part in it get hurt over it. And they are now skeptical to do that again. Why
Mhm.
would anyone want to do this again if it's just going to backfire on you? Debbie Opperman lost her job,
Mhm.
right?
And it probably, this type of stuff probably silences a lot of people. That's one of the things that they did talk about in the hearing, uh, the House Oversight and Government Reform on UFOs. They said that they would like to protect whistleblowers. They urged Congress to pass laws that were proposed that would help if there were any whistleblowers that were going to talk or say anything about any sort of what they might have seen, unidentified flying objects, that an Air Force pilot wouldn't feel like he would lose his job if he reported seeing something. So I think they're
Let me
working on
ask you
that.
this. Let me ask you this. So, somebody listening right now, say, I think Rob Ball was on here from the Sheffield area. Um, do you think that if somebody called up a news station right now to report a sighting or their involvement in a UFO case or incident, however you want to word it, um, what do you think would be a soundbite they could use to get their attention versus something that might turn them off? Like, how should they proceed? How should they open up? I can't imagine or go, yeah, I saw, you're not going to go, I saw a spaceship, right? I saw a UFO. Well, how do you know it's a UFO, right? I saw, lights doing this or acting in a particular way that would defy, logic. How do you think that opening line should be worded? I know I put you on the spot. I'm sorry.
Yeah. I'm not sure, because I'm, again, not sure that if you call a news station, any line that you have is going to work. I think the first question is going to be, well, what do you have documented? So like, we'll go back to the video aspect, that maybe it's not the best thing to play, but news video, if you've got some video
But it
that
gets
you can
attention,
show us,
right? It gets attention.
yeah. But, or if you don't have that, you're going to have something. You're not just going to get somebody put a story out of you just saying, oh, I saw something. I mean, maybe if you saw something and you reported it and you have a police report and a couple other people saw it and people are actually looking into what it is.
Well, you can't get a police report because there's no crime committed, but you maybe
Right.
a statement. Is that like
Right.
a formal statement with the police department? So call the police.
Yeah, so you need to have something. If you're just gonna, you think you saw something, you're just gonna call the news station. Like they're not like gonna have the resources to sort it out and make sure that you didn't just forget to take your meds that day. You know.
All right, so I'm calling you and, hey Heather, this is so and so. I just finished wrapping up a police statement involving this UFO or whatever, however you want to word it, and we have a picture of it. Now it's of interest because you have tangibles. You need tangibles.
Yes. Yeah, and then it's not just going to be any reporter that gets to make the decision. They're going to take all the information they have. They're going to say, "Oh, send me your
You're at
pictures."
the luck of who comes out.
And they're going to have to, then the person that makes the assignment, or you'll have to bring it to your boss, because you just don't randomly get to just do any story you want. I mean, you have to bring it and pitch it, and then they'll either say yes or no, we can, or they'll give it to
So
someone else. Like, say you called me, but I might go in to pitch the story to them and they'll say, no, we need you to do this, but here, we'll give the story to so and so if they like it.
Brenda in arts and entertainment.
Yes.
So then
That's even.
to break this to a station, would you just go to like online and go to the paper and go down to each individual reporter and send them, I guess kind of it, not everybody's going to have access to the Associated Press, right? So how, right? They're not going to be able to do an AP. So just individually email each reporter on their own, or just tips,
Yeah, and
or
if you happen to know who like the assignment manager is, that's actually a role at a station. They're the ones that, take the phone calls a lot from the front desk. They read the emails that go just to the generic .com of a station, and they don't always catch them all. But they're a good person if you do have a story you really want covered, to kind of to to have a rapport with, and then that way they can better get it covered. But no, it's difficult. I mean, it's difficult to get stories on the air that I want covered on the air, because sometimes it can just, because it's too time consuming, or you don't have the resources, or it's not fitting what the producer or the boss wants for that day.
okay, well, tomorrow's fine too.
There
So,
you go.
right. So, there are so many reporting agencies too, right? Or even MUFON and others where you can submit your sighting or encounter or what
Mhm.
have you. Unfortunately, that just sits in a database for the most part. So, to bring attention to something, then just to be clear, pull up the paper online, look for individual reporters, the tip line, and then the assignment director or manager,
Yep, assignment manager, assignment director. Mhm.
and then let them know that you have tangibles, pictures, and a police report or incident.
Statement, anything.
Yeah,
Yep.
incident report.
I mean,
Um,
and still good luck with that, but that's going to be the best
I know.
way.
I got lucky when you came out. I was like, my God, I was like, oh my God, she took it seriously and everything. She was so cool. So, but yeah, I got lucky. Did I not? I mean, I
I think
really
so,
did.
because I did too, because I don't think, and then at a station I worked at later, we would have never covered that, because at the point, the story we were covering with you is that it had been inducted and that you had the dedication of the monument was coming up. So it was sort of like a community interest story with a little flair, that could also get a little sensationalism. Um, But like I said, I worked at a station after that station that wouldn't have covered. They would have only did it if we could have, you know, uh, had something to tear the story apart, or had, you know, just some other side to kind of like say that it, you know, wasn't
Right. That's a good
as
point,
great as
because
it is.
the majority of what I've dealt with, which circles back to your question a while back, is that it almost seems like there's almost a need to destroy or find someone to be accountable for this or accountable for that,
Mhm.
or play down something, because and I don't understand why. Can you explain why that is?
It's I you know, it was one of the assignments that I liked the least, you know, when it's not just about bringing up the community. You have to, you know, hold maybe a leader accountable and kind of, you know, go at them. But I mean, I could see where, you know, that's helping, you know, getting things for the community and making sure. I mean, that's what, you know, journalists were supposed to do, you know, try to protect, you know, every person, and watch out, you know, what our leaders are doing and how they're spending the money. And but I also think there's a balance, and you know, what's going on in your community and how you can get involved. And I happen to like local historical societies and interesting stuff. And so I felt very lucky that I got to go out there and chat with all of the people and meet you. And then it was a big rush. We had to like get our information and just rush back. You know, had an hour drive back to the station, put it together, and it was on TV, you know, in minutes. So there's
So
that.
what do you, moving forward now with the topic, um, it does seem to be getting taken more seriously.
Mhm.
Um, I would think that the majority of those out there would feel more comfortable reporting something now than they would have, say, 10 years ago. It's simply a matter of finding the right avenue and
You're
to
right,
do.
and it's and always the right hook, because they're not just going to be like, oh, you know, this has always been happening. Like, why is it news today? So it would have to be an anniversary, a hook, and oftentimes they will look for, you know, it's a negative connotation, because that sometimes negative news sells clicks. But you just have to get or if you happen to work with a good PR person at your different, you know, Comic Cons you go to, and would you go to Goblin Con recently? That was it, right?
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know, I'm sure a lot of their headlines are, you know, spun by PR people that are working for them that can help say, okay, this is how to word this, and
Right.
this would work well on this
Yeah.
date. If you can just get a mention, you're probably not going to get a news
Yeah, you don't
story.
want to go, this is
Yeah.
Tom from Goblin Con. That
Yeah.
probably would be taken, you'd be taken very seriously. No, I got it. So delivery, I would say, right, why it's important today versus yesterday. Why
Mhm.
it has to be, make it current, powerful,
Mhm.
tangibles, have a police statement anyway. And I guess just go local then, or do you think push for more of the
I don't know.
corporate
You,
or
you could try local probably with the cuts. They might not, unless you're in an area that has, you know, a lot of extra reporters. But I think you never know. It's the luck of the draw. You've got to send and send. If there's something you want covered, you know, reach out to those assignment managers, reach out to individual reporters, see what they say. They probably will do some eye rolling, you know, in the newsroom. But also, yeah, you know what? If especially if you don't hear anything, with this being, you know, disclosure and what's really going on out there, and everyone thinks we're getting closer to finding some answers. I think, you know, maybe, you know, major news outlets, if you've got something like you do, and you think there's an anniversary you want to talk about, I think maybe some of the larger ones with the bigger online presence, that might be the way to go.
do we have any questions from anybody?
Yeah, I have a question. What are your thoughts on the Wall Street Journal article debunking UFOs, saying that all UFO sightings are government projects and it was an insider, inside projects, things like that?
Well, I know for a fact that they're not, because I've been briefed by those in Congress that actually have stated that there are um, crafts, if you will, that are currently unable to be looked at further because they can't even penetrate the shell and that kind of thing. So if we can't penetrate an object or get even inside it to see what's making it tick, for lack of a better word, then obviously, what we're seeing isn't just local or conventional.
Heather, what are your thoughts on the recent Wall Street Journal article debunking UFOs?
Well, I didn't think too much of it because I just thought, well, of course they're going to have that. I think that's a very big trend, especially with so many people, doing podcasts, speaking online. They want to take something and then you want to try to debunk it. I mean, that's kind of it's like a goal. It's like, I uncovered the story and that's one way of breaking the news by coming up with that and making it look like that, you've figured something out. But I was reading, I didn't think too much of it because I have read so many of the other articles, and after this hearing that came out, even the journalist that was involved said something like, it's not necessarily just about belief, it's about covering this and seeing what is out there, and there's something, and we're not being told exactly what it is. So if this Wall Street Journal article says it's all one thing, well, I'm sure they can't all be one thing. Maybe it is all, but until we get to that point where we know for sure, I'm not sure that gave us a great service unless they're going to link us to supporting evidence that can make those claims, especially since
Yeah, you
Tom
can't make a
certainly
blanket
stated that they're
statement
not
like
even
that. It
true.
doesn't make sense.
Yeah. But we're going to have lots. I think we're going to have that. I think more and more we're going to see articles like that. Where did they come from? Who wanted to put that out? Who wanted to make the public start believing one way or the other?
So I got a question about that. So there was a journalist who wanted to write it. I guess they wanted to feel like, oh my God, look what I did. But then there was an editor who had to give the okay to do it, right? Doesn't an chief editor go over that with a fine-tooth comb and make changes, right? Or no?
I think more so in larger newspapers, yes.
So would that have been not only, let's say, okayed or encouraged by the paper itself, or do
Well,
you
it
think
might have
that
been
would?
assigned for whatever reason happened, and I don't know why, or why they would have done it. It was probably someone's, pushed it on whoever. I don't know if the reporter wanted to do it. I don't know if the reporter was assigned to do it.
Yeah,
I
because
don't know.
then she's going to get blasted. Why did you write this? Why did you say that when maybe she was assigned to do it?
Mhm. And that happens
Yeah.
a lot. Like we get assigned stories that you don't necessarily like. You try to make it the best you can, but it's like your name is that byline on it, and now it's like, I didn't want to have to do the story, but that's how it works.
How do you think that these incidents that are reported are deemed fact? Are we up to that point yet where it's like, hey, like say Tom's incident with his family that, he got all the way up and, lo and behold, it's, the only, case, that's been proven historically true. But, which ones are deemed, this is legit, this is real?
Well, that's a great question. And I think that is the question because we don't have that answer. We don't have he passed the lie detector test, we have all these different things, but what is the one thing? Like we used to have Project Blue Book, remember, conducted by the US Air Force from 47 to 1969. And they're the ones that gave out the HINAC classifications. And Tom's was actually a CE1, close encounter of the first kind of that.
Originally,
So
yeah.
okay, so we have that. We know, so we're going to take that as a semi fact. But if
Yeah,
we're not,
back in the day, yeah.
yeah, if we're not doing, we don't have Project Blue Book, or we don't have anything and nothing's classified, as an individual or as a reporter or even as a congressman, like what is that line of, okay, now this is definitely a fact, you know?
That's good.
I
Yeah,
think
because
basically
even
you have testimony, you have people's
even
word.
yeah,
That's it.
even a Tic Tac is a video.
Hmm.
Technically, it's a gun video. Right. Yeah, it's getting harder and harder, but I think we're there though. I think it's around the corner. I think disclosure is around the corner.
We're closer
And
than
that's
we were like 10 years ago. We're getting closer. They're giving us little nuggets of information, little tidbits of facts here and there. But I think overall, they don't know what the heck is going on. And unless there's like the top, brain trust of the United States, the top brain trust of France, the top brain trust of Russia, and what other countries that have this information, unless we all start sharing this in a database or have, like, say, for instance, libraries be the custodians a lot of these information and kind of just here you go to the public and try to disseminate, fact from fiction, and maybe even share it with our scientific community and all that, then we can kind of see what is going on and what, we can try to answer a lot of these questions, because right now I think a lot of it is like a jigsaw puzzle. And there's only showing us some of the, the pieces, but not all of the pieces, but all of, but those people who have all the pieces, they can't even see them all together because they're all compartmentalized.
And I have read that there's paperwork and folders and stuff that's put away that you can't even access. I mean, you could try to do your own research, but of course, getting to it, you're not going to get to it.
And that I think that's why, again, and to your point, that we really didn't have anywhere for Debbie Opperman to mine. I'm going to go back to that because it's
Mhm.
we talked about
Yeah,
it. But you're right. When the state or whatever is looking for fact to say, where do we get tangibles? Where do we get that source documentation? They went right to Roswell. They went to the research library, and a lot of the stuff in there, we don't know if it's true or if there's a mix. And I think that's what's killing everybody. Like there are those who are not really proven because you can't, right? And then you have
mhm.
those that have a lot of witnesses and have a lot of support behind it, and now that's mixed in with maybe one that was a really good hoax, and now it's all muddied, right? And I think we need to start separating that. Maybe that would be a good starting point moving forward, would be to say, okay, well, this was proven to be um, authentic in some ways, and this one wasn't. Because yeah, that question is powerful, because there really is no one go to, right? There's nowhere to go to really know.
Mhm.
And when you mix everything up, it's tough. It ruins the authenticity, right?
Exactly. And then how
Yeah.
do we know what we have? What as we've read on, like, some stories were hoaxes back in the day. They would get published. And like I've talked to people or interviewed people who are like, yeah, no, this was supposed to be a hoax, but it was fun. And we've written about it. But was it? Was it? What part is true? What part isn't true? And so now to go back and sort through all of that, it's like, okay, what is true? How do we source it? What do we have here?
Well,
Another thing.
take yeah. I'm sorry. So take Boston, right? The
Mhm,
Historical Society in
mhm.
Boston. When Debbie was looking for someone to help her, the Historical Society in Boston said, well, if we were talking about the Boston Tea Party, we have people who specialize in that. If we were talking about Paul Revere, we have those who are, knowledgeable in that. We don't really have anyone who's knowledgeable on this topic. So maybe it's time we kind of maybe, I don't know, found a way to have local people be that voice, I guess, for historical societies, and maybe start there. There's no historical society that has a voice, someone who really has contacts within the field that can validate some of this stuff or disprove.
And from living it, how difficult it is to be that person that might be that researcher or put their time and effort into it, when a lot of people are probably going to disbelief or eye roll, or feel that, oh, with everything else going on in the world, why is that important? But I think with all this speak on disclosure, and especially with devices, recording devices getting better, even though we can't trust everything we see, I think that we know that there's something going on. I mean, because there have been too many reports of too many similar things, and whether it is, government, or if it's testing, or what it is, I think that we might be getting closer, just because we're going to be asking more and more, uh, about the questions, we're wanting the answers. And then especially as our cameras are getting, better, that we could feasibly almost, capture something one day.
Any more questions?
I think it's also kind of difficult, for folks to, even though we have the devices on the ready, someone, said that is, capturing a UFO is like trying to capture a car crash right when it happens. But it's
Yep.
already done. It's already, what you see is the after effect, but you didn't capture the actual car crash, the actual impact. It's very, very difficult to do that. And that's why I also think, you have to rely on testimony, eyewitnesses.
Mhm.
And I think that's, really important. And instead of like, just basing everything on just, video evidence, because I think some of the best evidence out there is like, say for instance, Tom's friend, Travis Walton. Ever since I heard that story, I'm like, this guy's not lying. Tom, do you know Travis? Is he lying?
Yeah, Travis is a good friend of mine. He's been to my house and drives my car and everything else. Of course he's not. I mean, you've got what, 5 people that all passed polygraph tests, were all there. If something was concocted, it would have came out years ago, right? I mean, somebody would have said something. And so no, I don't think anybody goes to those lengths to make a point when it's what was meant to be a joke, right? And
Mhm.
there's those rings around the trees where you have a difference in growth. You're aware of that, right? Where the accident or the incident took place, the trees grew at a different rate. If you go back to Sheffield, the corn grows, taller there than anywhere else near our park. What that means, I don't know. But yeah, no, it's no, Travis. I support Travis. Absolutely, 100%.
Do we have any other questions in regards to this topic? One question is, do you think the government has signed an agreement with
No,
extraterrestrials?
no, of
Not
course
human
not.
intelligence. No.
No, I don't think so at all. Because first of all, we don't have to sign anything. Anyone anyone who's that far advanced. I mean, we're just look at it this way, right? And I've said this before. We've had what, 5 global extinctions, right?
Mhm.
One, two,
I
three,
say,
four, five. 5 freaking global extinctions. And to have 9 million species here following 5 global extinctions, healthy, what have you, there had to be, you know, 5 or 6 males, 5 or 6 females, so that they would have met and you go, yeah, hey, what are you doing later, right? They have to meet and, flourish. Although that's why the ark doesn't work. I mean, two of each species on an ark, they would have been inbred and died off anyway. The pharaohs, the same thing. So our planet was stocked, and I'm not ruling out the idea or the plausibility that man might have been here along, years along with the dinosaur. Who knows that we got extinct as well? But no matter how you slice it, what we're seeing is so much more advanced than we are. We don't need to go. It's okay to come here when there's a good possibility that they stocked our planet to begin with, that we're ancestors, right? I mean, there is some truth to that. Where did we come from? You know, we're the only species that can't eat raw food, raw meat. We get sick, right? We'd never be able to survive without the comforts of a jacket and a warm cup of coffee, right? I mean, we weren't meant to be roaming around in the woods somewhere, right? I mean, we came from somewhere. Just like when we go to Mars, or our Earth is not going to last forever. Our sun's going to burn out one day. It's going to be a long ways away, but where are we going to go? Where are those people that are influential here, have the means to do, you know, or to venture out and go somewhere else to prolong humanity, right? They're going to go. They're going to bring, you know, cows. They like steak. They're going to bring seeds. They're right. I mean, right? Who doesn't like chicken? A little, you know, shake and bake. So they're going to bring what they need to survive elsewhere, just like this planet was, and still, I believe, is our galaxy's arc. So no, I don't think we need to have an agreement with anybody. I think that if, first of all, what we're seeing is is an issue of national security. That's why the secrecy, right? Because once it
Mhm.
falls under national security, it's nobody's business. It's tight-lipped. However, there are still, and the whistleblower thing, Grush really isn't a whistleblower, right? He's only repeating what he's been told. So it's second-hand information. Although he is the figurehead for that, but do we really have a legitimate whistleblower? When you really get down to it, do we really? Who's that person? Because I know that a lot of the information Grush was told was relayed to him behind closed doors at the hearings, and he was the voice for that because they wanted to be kept off camera. So what is he's saying is true, I believe. It's just really not him being the whistleblower. He's the voice or the figurehead for it,
Right, the
right?
figurehead.
The
And
figurehead.
I think it is interesting what can one country disclose without hurting your own national security? Like what do all the different countries have and know that it's their own
Domino
security
effect.
start releasing it. Yeah. So I'm sure that's all part of it. And I'm sure I know nothing compared to the big issue, but
Well, I
Well,
think, you know,
closer.
in my opinion, I think is a reason why we don't get full disclosure because you know, government will collapse our financial institutions, religious you know, institutions will collapse. You know, we can't defend against technology that's so far ahead, you know, that can basically do like the day the earth stood still, can shut off, you know, all of our, you know, electronics at will. And, you know, that is a threat to the power structure, you know, in each nation that we have. There will be no nations anymore. We're going to be like, you know, that's it. You know, the power struggle. Well, why should we listen to this leader or that leader anymore? Or, you know, it would be a different dynamic, a different paradigm. And I think we as a species, we're not ready for that. We're slowly being conditioned to get there, and we're still not there yet. But this, at the same time, are, you know, are we, you know, when will we be able to handle this information and the responsibility of living life after disclosure?
That's
I
a
don't think
tough
it's a
one.
big deal at all. I think most people think, you know, we're among off-world life anyway. What do you think, Heather?
I think a lot of people do believe. I know when I would post a few posts about, you know, doing an interview with you or a person that we were interviewing or doing this, I expected maybe one or two people to say, "Oh yeah, loo ha ha," ha," but no one. Everybody was either just being nice to me, or they were saying, "Oh, I believe there's something. There's got to be something. We can't be alone. It'd be nice to hear more." And it just seems more people are either they just want the information, or I think they're willing to say, you know, to think that there's not more that I don't know about would be wrong.
And then all those individuals who have had sightings or knew someone who did, now
Mhm.
suddenly they're no longer, you know, crazy. So there would be a validating,
Mhm.
you know, or a relishing to with respect to that, right? So I don't know.
And
No.
again, it would go through like splicing through all. How do you tell who was making it up and who's crazy and who isn't? You know, so you've got all of that to deciphering to do.
Now, let me ask you this, and this will be the last question for the evening. How will they take it? The EBEs, the non-human intelligence, the aliens, the ETs, will they finally reveal themselves, or they'll still be absent for the most part? But, except for little, incidents like what Tom and his family went through. What do you think?
Well, that's a good question. I think that, and I think the visitations and what we're seeing, there are multiple reasons for that. Maybe there's mining interest, whatever that is. And does our time mirror their time? Is time the same? If they're dimensional, then like we mentioned, Mark has the theory that they're toggling between two dimensions, so they're not really here or there. You've probably heard that. And so if it is dimensional, then is our time relevant to what they need to do or what they're trying to accomplish? But if it's linear and they're under the seas, under the oceans, and that kind of thing, UAPs, um, then then our time would run in it or alongside theirs, right? Because we're not going from dimension to here, what have you. So um, I don't think that I don't think there's really an interest in coming for them to come forward and say, yes, we're here. I don't think it matters to extraterrestrials or those outside our species. I think that, in their eyes, they have something to do. They have an agenda and they're just going to do it. I don't think they care what we think, or if they want to be part of, maybe they want to remain anonymous. Maybe they want to not interfere, and we're just happen to catch them from time to time because of our technology. But what they have to do doesn't require, camaraderie. I'm not sure that's important.
Makes sense to me.
Does it? Because I thought I wasn't sure I put that forth very clearly, but I guess what I'm trying to say is we want to know and we want to be part. We want to understand and maybe have an understanding of what's going on. But I don't think life that's hypothetically a 500,000 years ahead of us or 1,000,000 years ahead of us really cares what we think.
Yeah, they probably don't want to have to include us or talk to us. They just want to use us, like you said, for whatever it is they need.
Yeah, DNA, food, whatever
Sure.
it is, right? Minerals. Yeah. Maybe they left something here years ago and they're coming back for it. Maybe there's a mining interest. Maybe the O negative blood group is of interest. Maybe they're walking amongst us right now. If they are, then they obviously want to be kept, it- secret. I don't know. I don't think a species that much more involved than us is waiting to now to reveal themselves, right? And now we have nuclear power plants, and we've got, we're if they were going to do it, wouldn't they have done it back when we really didn't have the means to fight back, right?
Yeah, likely. It does seem that for the most part, if they're out there, we've been left alone.
Yeah, exactly. And if time travel is possible, then this should have all come out years ago, right?
But they don't want us knowing that there's time travel.
Yeah. Well,
We
no,
can't disclose that.
you're right. I'm going to call the news later and go, Heather Kovar, the
Yeah,
reason I
right.
call you, I've got a police statement here and some pictures.
No, that's
Yeah.
exactly the opposite of what.
Yeah. But you know what I mean? I don't think a, a smarter or a more intelligent being or life has waited to 2025 or 2026 to reveal themselves. And I don't think if it comes out, it's going to be willingly. I think that's going to be like a SpaceX or like I don't think it's going to be NASA either, because NASA is actually controlled and run by government. That's where their funding comes from. So they can only say what they're told they're allowed to. Whereas an independent space program like SpaceX or what have you, I think will be one of the first to say, yeah, we've seen this and we have proof of that.
That's probably where it will start happening.
All right. Anything else?
No, I think we are done for the evening. I'd like to thank Emmy Award-winning journalist Heather Kovar for joining us this evening, and of course Thom Reed of the Berkshires UFO Family Incident. Thank you so much for joining us on this hotbed topic on UFOs, disclosure, and the media. Thank you for being a part of the Western Connecticut UFO Conference for 2025. Until next time, have a great night.